Welcome back, guys. This is a very special interview that I want to share with you today. Namely, we're going to interview a person that I've been personally fascinated by for years, and I've been following him for years as well. This video was also very difficult to record because they rejected the interview several times before they finally accepted. And you might be wondering, who is this amazing guy you're going to interview? Well, today we're interviewing Jesse Powell, the CEO of Kraken. And I don't want to have a long intro because I want the interview to speak for itself. Once again, this is one of the best interviews I've ever done, so you have to trust me on this one. And you will see his journey from absolute zero to having this company now that is worth 4 billion. But also it wasn't easy. He had so many challenges. It's mind-blowing how much he had to go through to even survive to this day, to even have a business today. Also, please remember that they're always in the top when it comes to trust, liquidity, volume, user base, reputation, and they have never been hacked. And they're still expanding, they're still growing. They are 800 people and they're all working remotely. As you will understand from the interview, Jesse has an interesting leadership style and the way he has structured the whole organization. At the same time, you need to remember as well that they were founded in 2014, which is a long time ago. Most exchanges from that time are not even existing, or they are irrelevant, like Poloniex. Nobody cares about Poloniex nowadays, but they were popular in the past. But Kraken, they were popular in the past and they're still popular today, and they're still growing and still expanding. That being said, guys, I give to Jesse Powell. And just for the record, I know some people will ask, hey Ivan, is this sponsored? It is not sponsored, absolutely not. In fact, as I told you, I had issues to even book Jesse. But that being said, Jesse Powell from Kraken. Okay, Jesse, welcome to the show. Amazing to have you here, and you are obviously a very famous man nowadays in crypto. You don't really need an introduction, but for people who have missed you, who is Jesse and what do you do?
Jesse Powell, co-founder and CEO of Kraken, which is a digital asset exchange. We support 20-something assets and fiat currencies.
And it's also one of the OGs in the space, I would say, because there are so many exchanges nowadays that recently got started and recently came up, while Kraken has been around for a very long time. So my goal with this interview is to really share with the world your story, how you got started, who was Jesse before Kraken, what made you start Kraken. I know that starting Kraken was not easy. I don't remember where I saw it, but I read or heard somewhere that you struggled a lot with banking, that you couldn't get bank accounts, and it's one of the struggles you get when you support fiat. So we're going to discover that, the struggles, but also the lessons that you've learned, the mistakes that you've made, and the lessons you've learned from those mistakes during this entrepreneurial journey. We're going to discuss exchanges, exchange industry, and so many different other things. But then, that being said, Jesse, who were you before Kraken? Who were you before you really embarked on this journey?
Yeah, so before Kraken, I had a company selling virtual items and currencies for online games like World of Warcraft Gold, Diablo Swords, we did RuneScape Gold, EverQuest, MapleStory, like all the popular games. So I had that business from 2001 until 2011. And, when I found out about Bitcoin in early 2011, it was just, my first thought was, oh, great, this is just another virtual currency that we can sell on our website. But as I got deeper into Bitcoin, I, quickly realized that this was much more than that. And it was something that could completely change the world.
Right. It all starts with computer game money. That is how most people understand Bitcoin in the beginning. And it's funny that you mentioned RuneScape Gold, because I played RuneScape for hours when I was a kid. It was my addiction. And that is, by the way, how I got interested in programming. So I think gaming really leads so many people into technology. Do you have any experience with that as well, that you playing games as a kid led you also into this space of technology?
For sure. Yeah, I think, like you said, like a lot of kids have that experience, like you're playing a game and you want to learn how to make a game. And right. I had a Nintendo since I was in like the first grade, and then was playing, like I got involved with like just playing a ton of games on the computer as well, and wanted to make some games. And you could make some very simple games with like basic, and later I wanted to make some more complicated games. And this was like back in maybe like the late 80s, where I was, thinking like, okay, how can I make a much more complicated game? And I got very overwhelmed, basically with like all of the graphics, having like who would design all the graphics. Basically, it was just me. So, doing all the graphics and stuff like that, it just became clear that like doing a full game was like a massive project.
Is it, Yes, sorry to interrupt you, but it's interesting that you mentioned the graphics. I had a similar experience as well. When I played RuneScape, I also went into programming because I wanted to make my own game. And it all sounded so easy when you just learn how to code. I was thinking, I just need to learn how to code, then I will be able to make a game. But just like you mentioned, you realize how much time all the graphics take. You never think that it will be such a big thing, but it is. Of course it is. Nowadays, you have all of these asset stores, like Unity Asset Store, and you can buy cheap assets. But at your times, that wasn't possible, of course.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think a lot of people that are coming into crypto, like you said, recognize this kind of virtual currency from their gaming experience. And like every kid these days that's playing video games knows about virtual currency. They know about special hats or microtransactions, like cosmetic stuff. Some games are selling loot boxes or things that are like explicitly powerful in the game. So I think a lot of people now, the younger people growing up, are already have this concept of like a digital value in their life, some sort of virtual value that's outside of their bank account. They might not even have a bank account, but they have this sort of like store of value online in their game.
And especially when you look at kids playing Fortnite, they're spending all this money, they're spending all their parents' money on the skins. They don't even give them better stats in the game. It's just cosmetics. So it's just a clear indication that the younger generation understands and grasps the concept of digital assets way better than maybe even you and I do. This 12, 11 years old running around playing Fortnite and spending so much money. And that's success of Fortnite, I think, shows that to a large extent. And so you were creating this website where you sold the digital assets, and this was way back. Which years was it approximately?
Yeah, so started it in 2001, basically right after Diablo 2 came out. I had known that people were selling virtual goods since about 98. I had a bunch of friends that were playing Ultima Online. Actually, back then I was working at an internet service provider doing tech support on the phone. And in the office there, basically after you memorized how to fix every internet problem, you could just use your computer for whatever you wanted. And like basically all the guys there were just playing Ultima Online all day while they were
right.
taking phone calls at work. So these guys were all, like hoarding gold and like building castles. And, there were other like rare items like the black dye kit, which was, discontinued at some point. So it was like kind of a limited thing. There were castles that were selling for thousands of dollars. So like that was kind of like the first exposure I had to that world. And then a few years later, Diablo 2 came out, and there was sort of the same dynamic there. And I thought, okay, like I'm going to try to make a real effort just to see if I can make money at Diablo 2. And I started doing it through killing monsters myself and finding items and selling those items on eBay. And you could make pretty good money back then. Like I was making probably $25 an hour just playing the game, knowing which monsters to kill. And eventually kind of expanded that into, basically I started to recognize this arbitrage opportunity between the prices on eBay and the prices in the game. Like if you were to trade for stuff within the game, and you could actually, buy something for $5 on eBay, which you could trade in the game for another item that would be worth like $30 on eBay. So there was this real like disconnect between the eBay prices and the in-game prices. So I was like doing these trades, basically this arb, and eventually ran across this guy who was always selling. He seemed like he had like unlimited quantities of some items that he was selling on eBay, and asked him about it. And basically he had discovered some exploit within the game, which allowed him to effectively create like unlimited quantities of items.
Right.
So I was like, wow, okay, this sounds really cool. I mean, before this, actually, I had started selling my stuff through a website. This is my site, and I had also asked like a couple other sellers if they wanted to sell through my site. So it was sort of like the Amazon format where like people could just post what they wanted to sell, and anyone could buy it and it was all through PayPal and stuff. But there was all kinds of problems with this. Basically, like people were very inconsistent about like their delivery times and like the customer service experience. So when I met this guy that had this method of just creating unlimited of any items, I made a deal with him basically, and we kicked off all the other sellers on my website, and we just started selling from his inventory effectively, which was unlimited. So we could like outprice anybody, and we could just have a very consistent like customer experience. We could deliver things instantly 24/7.
But also I'm thinking you gotta be careful not to dump the price too much, because if you flood the market with too many, the price will dump. That's one of the most fascinating things with these games. It's like in RuneScape as well, the market was real. You as a kid, you learn about pump and dumps because they did happen in RuneScape as well.
Yep. Yeah, totally. So yeah, that was an issue. So yeah, we obviously tried to maintain the price as much as we could. We didn't want to dump the market, and this happens like all the time. Like there will be some exploit like this is revealed to the public, and there's some period of time before it's patched where everyone just goes totally nuts, and you see like massive inflation of all kinds of items. Like of course the most powerful, most expensive items are the first ones that get massively duped, like duplicated. And so you'll see like the value tank in those. I mean, it's really interesting that there are these markets for these items within the games, and they have like these real kind of like price dynamics that you have like with crypto or even stocks.
By the way, they are very, very real for many people in the world, and it's about death and life in many cases. Yeah. I've read this article that when there is an electric outage in Venezuela, the market for dragon bones in RuneScape collapses, because there are so many people working. Their literal day job is to kill dragons in RuneScape and sell bones, and then trade for real money. And it clearly shows how tragic that situation is, because RuneScape gold is more valuable to them than real Venezuelan money. And also there's no opportunities as well. You have more opportunities in this virtual world than in your real world, in your real country. And I think it's just so mind-blowing to see that it is like that. It's not just a joke. It is like that. People are literally working full-time, killing dragons in RuneScape. And while it might sound funny to many people, it's really, really tragic.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are referred to as like gold farmers. And, instead of being out in the field growing corn or whatever crops that they're going to sell to another country, basically they're in the game killing dragons to find bones to sell to Westerners effectively. And I mean, I guess there are worse jobs that you could have, but I visited some of these guys in China. So for some of the games like RuneScape, we actually just bought items from other people. We didn't have some exploit to just create items. We had to buy them and resell them. And I visited a couple of these operations in China where, it's just like massive rooms full of like hundreds of guys that are, in some cases, they're playing the game themselves. But, as time went on, the technology progressed, and basically they had bots playing the games. And the job of the human was then just to check that the bot was okay. Sometimes you have like what's called the game master, or like the staff of the game company inside the game looking for bot activity. And if they think you're a bot, they'll send you a message that says, "Hey, I think you're a bot. Like, you should respond to me, and so I don't ban your account." And they'll have them perform some kind of task. Like they'll ask them some questions, or they'll say like run in a circle and then like jump 3 times or whatever. But the bots that they were running are sophisticated enough that when they get a message from a GM, it like sets off an alert. There's like a siren that goes off and a light on the computer, and then a guy just goes over to that computer and like answers the question, and then the GM goes away, and then the bot goes back to work.
So you were running this site. It seems successful because you could both use the bugs in the system, in the games, and also you had the international connections. You went to China even, so you really had a business. And then suddenly Bitcoin arrives. Do you remember that Bitcoin moment where you heard about Bitcoin first, and the person that told about Bitcoin to you?
Yeah, actually, I just read about it myself randomly. I came across an article. I don't even remember where it was, but this was like March of 2011. And I thought first, okay, like, we're already listing all these virtual currencies. Maybe we can sell Bitcoin on the website as well. But then like I started reading more about it, and I just like read everything about it. Back then, like you could actually read everything that there was. And there was already a few years of discussions on Bitcoin Talk and in other places about it. So, I quickly realized that this was like much bigger than any kind of like video game currency. Like this could be like a global digital currency that the whole world uses. And one thing that was always, even though World of Warcraft had like tens of millions of players, one thing that was preventing that from being like a real store of value and a real reliable bank account basically was just that they could ban your account at any time. And obviously there's like inflation happening in World of Warcraft as well. Like the gold itself is not a good store of value. You can collect certain items that might be a good store of value, but the gold supply is inflating all the time. The value of the gold goes down over time. I mean, you can see like when World of Warcraft first comes out, it's like $5 for one gold, and then like 10 years later, it's like 5 cents, for one gold. So,
Right.
Terrible store of value. So, one of the appealing things about Bitcoin is just like there's a finite supply of this. Also, there's a very predictable schedule of the supply growth. There's no permission to use it. There's no central authority. Blizzard can't just ban your account and then you're screwed. So it was really attractive from that perspective. I thought the potential just as like a global currency was really strong. But then also as a payment mechanism, it solved a bunch of problems that we had at the virtual goods business. So, we're constantly dealing with chargebacks, like stolen credit cards being used, or even just kids using their parents' credit cards without permission. We had like a lot of really cheap items. Some items were like 50 cents. And so if someone bought that 50-cent item, the first like 35 cents is going to the payment processor.
Right.
So that's really eating into the margins. And then we just had like a bunch of global customers and suppliers who we always had issues doing payments with. The guys in China, we would be sending like $100,000 a week back to China, but each person in China could only convert $50,000 a week into the local currency, into Chinese yuan. So that meant every week to pay our suppliers in China, we had to find 2 new people. And so we had to develop this network of like everybody's cousins, and like, it was like just logistically a nightmare. So Bitcoin like solved a ton of these problems, and like when people think about like the unbanked, they're always thinking about people in rural India or Africa, but really it's like there's tons of people in the world that just don't have access to a credit card or some way to pay for something online, or they live in a place where like Nigeria or something where it's just like the fraud risk is extremely high, and they're not allowed to pay for stuff online, or you're just like a child, you're under the age of 18, but you want to buy something online, you really have no way of paying for something digitally.
And that was very annoying. It wasn't that long ago. I was 17, and you had to ask the parent for the card and can I buy this, please? So it's really a pain point. And also, I think you really tell a story which irritates me so much when I hear what you say about the fact that you have suppliers in China, you're doing business, you have something they want, there is a supply and demand, and you meet and you want to do transaction, but it's impossible. It's impossible to do smoothly. You have to create whole workarounds just to get this payment through. And it just makes me think about how much human potential is being lost and how much productivity we're losing just because you have this system that is outdated and filled with middlemen that don't really add a lot of value to the transaction. So this is very, very important point that I think many people need to understand, not just because it's more convenient. Think about the bigger picture, how much time is being lost and how much human potential is being lost when each % of your productivity goes to the middleman. And also it takes time and a lot of energy. So you heard about Bitcoin on the internet, you read all about it, you realize, hey, this is amazing for my business. This is very, very good for us. But at that time, obviously, it wasn't very useful like it is today. There were no exchanges. Nobody really accepted it nor understood it to the extent people do today. Mm-hmm. So what made you think that this will really, really be big? What kind of vision did you have? This vision you just told me about global payments from day one, or did it go slowly? Did it go fast? How did your understanding of this develop?
Yeah. I thought global payments from day one would be huge. It was just like the immediately obvious use case for us, just knowing what all the friction points we were having with our suppliers and with our customers. This was like very much needed. And I knew that people had tried other things like eGold, and there was Liberty Reserve. But the problem is just always that it's centralized, and they're always attacked by some government and forced to shut down. So, I thought that payments would be like the obvious use case. I wasn't so much thinking about like a digital gold as a store of value. I guess that was like less interesting to me in the beginning, but obviously, like over time, I realized that was a huge potential value of Bitcoin as well. But in the early days, fortunately, I had a friend, Roger Ver, who you probably know of. He's
of course,
infamous in the space, who I had known since I was like 16 years old. Wow. 2 weeks after 2 weeks after I found out about Bitcoin, Roger messaged me and said, "Hey, have you heard about Bitcoin?" And then we just went like totally down the rabbit hole together.
It's interesting that you mention him, because most people don't realize how much he has been involved in the space even before most people heard about Bitcoin. And also, I interviewed CZ from Binance, and he also told me that Roger was the one that really started. He met Roger and he really got so much advice from Roger. But actually, Roger told CZ not to start an exchange because it's so difficult and it's so so much work to do. Then CZ still started Binance. But it's interesting that both you and him had a tight connection to Roger, and you both started reading and researching. But as I understand it, you were a few weeks before Roger, or a few days before Roger, learning about Bitcoin.
I'm not sure. Like he already knew a lot by the time he messaged me about it.
Right.
I'm not sure who actually found out first. But yeah, I mean.
So you went to school. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm just curious. You went to school together. How did you know this since 16 years old?
No, we didn't go to the same school, but we had some mutual friends, and we met playing Magic the Gathering together. So I would always see Roger at like the Magic card shop or like at Magic tournaments, and our groups of friends like hung out. So I just we just knew him and a bunch of other guys from that, and there are actually like a lot of other guys from Magic that have.
So Roger and you knew each other since you were 16. You were in touch. You started researching Bitcoin together. And when did you realize that I need to work in Bitcoin? Bitcoin is going to be big, and I really need to utilize this once in a lifetime opportunity and build something in the space.
Yeah, well, pretty shortly after. I mean, we were already doing like mining. And we started working on a forum basically to get gamers to trade Bitcoin for their virtual goods. I think we were a little bit too early with that. We didn't get much traction early on, but we did end up actually like buying a lot of Diablo 3 gold for Bitcoin early on, which was probably like the worst trade of all time. Diablo
right. So you did find other people who actually sold the video game items for Bitcoin at that time. It's surprising that community even existed that early.
Yeah, we were trying to create that community, and we had, I don't know, a few hundred people on there, but not enough success to keep the forum going long term. So we ultimately ended up like handing it off to some other guys to run, and I think they eventually shut it down. But so, we were trying to do some things just kind of casually in the beginning. But then what really kind of triggered me to get more involved professionally in the space was in June of 2011, Mt. Gox got hacked. And, Roger happened to live like a few blocks away from the Gox office in Tokyo.
Yes, yeah.
And, you probably heard the story. Like he went over to their office and found out that there's just like two guys in the office, and one had just been hired yesterday. So basically it was like Mark, and this brand new guy. And, the exchange was offline. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody could trade. Basically Gox was like 99% of all the trading at the time. So Roger's like, talking to Mark, finding out what anyone can do to help. Roger calls me up, says, "Hey, do you want to come out to Japan and help Gox, like basically get back on its feet?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. Fortunately, the virtual goods business was largely like on autopilot. It wasn't like a full-time thing for me in 2011. So I was on the next plane to Tokyo and spent about a week and a half there, and came back from that thinking like somebody's got to make another exchange. We can't just have like one exchange in the whole ecosystem, and somebody has to do this in a very like legitimate way that's going to make regulators comfortable, to make banks comfortable, to make traditional financial services comfortable, to make people who are apprehensive about this new technology comfortable in trying it out. So we wanted to kind of take that approach to it, as sort of building this bridge from the old world to the new world, and getting people across it. So to do that, we had to kind of do everything in a legit way. We couldn't just kind of like serve dark market purposes, or serve like a niche gambling market. So I asked my my CTO from the virtual goods business if he wanted to come start this Bitcoin exchange with me. And fortunately, he was like the best hacker I've ever met. And I knew security was obviously like, a top priority, just given what he'd just seen with Mt. Gox. And so I was like very comfortable with that. And he was also writing bots for like trading markets and stuff like that. So he was already like really into this kind of world. He's kind of like the perfect guy to start an exchange with. And if I didn't have somebody like him, there's no way I would have done it, because I knew that this was like an extremely complicated business. And so he was game, and then we got started like in 2011. We started the company in July of 2011.
And I think it's important to reiterate one of the lessons I learned from you during this call, and that is that when you start something, you never know how big it will be, because you started doing video game trading, and obviously you could not imagine the scale that would grow to now that you have Kraken. Because really, if you didn't start that video game platform, if you didn't start trading virtual assets back then, you wouldn't be where you are right now. And so I think many people in life, they're just trying to find the perfect idea, while in reality, if you just do what you like and what you feel is important to you right now, suddenly you will see this door open up out of nowhere. And you would never see this door if you didn't just start with a small thing. So just like you were doing the video game, then you suddenly see the Bitcoin door opening up. You would never have seen that door if you weren't in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was like a 10-year journey, right? Like, to get from trading virtual goods into like the Bitcoin door opening up. I always say, like you don't know what's going to happen, like you want to go from A to C, but you might not even see it. Like if you get to B, you might see something else, or, you don't know how you're going to get to C until you get to B. So I think like if you're a generally curious person, if you're a good problem solver, if you see opportunities, then, I'd say just like follow the adventure and see where it takes you. And you'll just have new opportunities opening up before you. So it's not, I think sometimes people get frozen just thinking like, well, I don't see how I'm going to get there to the end state. I think it's okay to just start the quest and see where it takes you.
You talked about the fact that Mt. Gox had issues in 2011, but it still took a couple of years for it to collapse, because I think they collapsed in 2013. So did you start Kraken already in 2011, or you waited for them to completely go out of business?
No, yeah, we started working on it in 2011. We didn't actually launch until 2013. So we spent almost 2 years developing it, and Gox finally collapsed in it's like February of 2014, where they were hacked. Like, well, they had been getting hacked all along, but we finally found out, where they basically were totally insolvent in 2014. So after that, we were fortunate that we were the only other Euro market, and we basically absorbed like all of Mt. Gox's Euro volume when they went down in 2014. But I think that was a massive setback to the industry. And after that, you started to get like, just regulators were aware of it, everyone was aware of it, and yes. Things kind of like the banks just like didn't want to bank anyone anymore. There was a real chilling effect on the whole industry.
you saw Mongoose collapsing, you launched Kraken, and you had fiat from day one. Is that correct? That you could deposit your euros and then switch to Bitcoin?
Yeah, we had Euro functionality from day one. We actually couldn't get a US bank account for a long time. So, so the Euro was like the first market that we went with. We were fortunate to get a bank account with Fedor Bank, who's a German bank, who were awesome. The former the co-founder and CEO Matthias Kroner was a real, he calls himself like the pirate of banking. He's a really kind of like cutting edge guy, who kind of like anti-authority guy, who was really pro Bitcoin. So we just got very lucky to find that relationship with Fedor Bank, which allowed us to do euros.
You started trading euros. What kind of certificates, approvals did you get from the government? I mean, nowadays there's so much you need to do. You need to have dealer brokerage certificate and license. At that time, I guess you had to be wondering, do I even need this, or is it just computer game money I'm dealing with and nobody will care? What went through your head? Because suddenly I can imagine in 2013, 14, you're starting to deal with a lot of money, and this becomes bigger than you probably ever thought it would be.
Yeah. So earlier on, like in 2011 to 2013, we thought, okay, like we can just treat this as computer game money. But it was like March of 2013, FinCEN in the United States, which is like a financial services regulator, came out with some guidance that explicitly said cryptocurrency is going to be treated just like money is. It's going to be regulated, and you have to follow all of these banking rules for KYC and for anti-money laundering and all of this stuff. So that actually set back our launch by like 6 months, because we ended up having to like build all of this stuff in before we launched. And I'm glad we did it, because we've seen some bad situations that other exchanges have gotten into where they haven't like really done KYC from day one. The penalties and stuff that you can accrue over time are just like massive. So, back at the time of 2014, it was like a lot of money being involved. The licensing situation is different all over the world. When we launched in 2013, we actually we had been actively talking to different regulators. In the UK, we got a no action letter. They said they actually really understood Bitcoin very well back then. It was like surprising how well they understood it. And they said that this is not currently regulated, so you don't need a license at this time. And we talked to some other governments as well. We talked to the Danish regulator. We were talking to several state regulators in the United States, and also the guys in Japan. And in most places, it was not yet regulated. I mean, basically, the guidance was to do the KYC anti-money laundering stuff, but there's not like an explicit license at this time. So we did all that. Unfortunately, this was not enough for many banks. Banks would say, well, we know they told you, even you have a letter that says you don't need a license, but we don't want to give you a bank account unless you have some sort of license. So I think that's actually been a stumbling block for many people in the industry, many exchanges in the industry, who are kind of in this gray area, unfortunately, where the regulator says you don't need a license, and the bank says if you want a bank account, you should get some sort of license.
But even if you don't need a license, you still need to comply with current regulation and kind of assume that you are under those rules.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So there's still some kind of like base layer of rules, which are, at least in the United States, there's the money services business rules, which apply to everyone who's dealing with this kind of stuff, like any kind of money service business, almost any financial service, they have to follow these certain rules, and no matter if they have a license or not. And so we're doing that, but that's not always enough for the bank. The bank will say, like, we want an explicit license from somebody. So you have a lot of companies that just can't get bank accounts because the regulator won't give them a license because there isn't one to do what they're doing, and the bank says, well, go get some license. And some people have actually gone to get just any random license in order to get a bank account.
Right, right. And that's a whole industry right now. You see different countries such as Estonia and Switzerland and a few others really trying to attract as much business as possible in those regards. I know Swedish guys who started an exchange recently. They tried to do it in Sweden where I'm based, but they just found it way easier in Estonia and went there instead. Also, it's important to note right now, and you guys who are watching the channel, you probably know that now the regulators are pushing for the so-called travel rule, that the exchanges will be more like banks, in that if I transfer some funds from one exchange to another, you also need to give some personal information about me. Is that
Right.
correct? So how is that playing out? Because we've seen it in the news, but we haven't really seen anyone adopt it yet. And do you need some kind of global system that all exchanges adopt? How do you think this will really be adopted and implemented?
Yeah, I think that so it doesn't have to be enacted yet. Like there's not a requirement yet that we be doing it. It seems like we're going to have to do it at some point in the future. And basically, yeah, it says that if you are what they call a VASP, a virtual asset service provider, that if you are sending coins or any sort of tokens from one exchange or one wallet to another, where you're the controller of the private keys and you're a business holding keys for other people, you have to also pass along with that transfer some identity information about the owner of those funds. And this is sort of like a replication of the system that exists for fiat currency transfers in the banking system.
Yes.
So like when Swift is sending a wire transfer from one bank to another, the bank is also sending the identity account holder information. So the expectation is that we basically replicate this for crypto. We obviously could do this with other crypto exchanges. Anytime there's a transfer, if we know that address belongs to, let's say Bitstamp, let's say Kraken. There's a user with an account on both exchanges. He's withdrawing from his Kraken account. He's sending it directly to Bitstamp. If we have a relationship with them, we could know that this address belongs to Bitstamp, and therefore we are going to send information to Bitstamp at the time of this transfer. And likewise in the other direction. There's definitely some technical work here to do this, and nobody's really set up for it yet. But I think what you might see in many cases, though, is there's kind of the exception to doing this is that if the user withdraws the coins to a wallet that they control, not like owned by another company, then you don't have to send any information. So if you want to avoid this, you can kind of just withdraw to your own wallet on your phone, like your Bread wallet or whatever, and then send it again on to the next exchange.
Right, and the whole regulation becomes basically worthless. It's toothless because, if I can just do one more transaction in between, you cannot trace anything. And also, well, you could if you really subpoena both exchanges and then you can trace. But the whole idea is that there should be a transaction and personal information with the transaction. Also, it gets me thinking about all the exchanges that don't really have KYC. Even if you look at the BitMEX and leverage exchanges, many cases you don't need to have KYC to trade. So potentially it also means that you won't be able to transact from, for example, BitMEX to Kraken or to other exchange because the requirement is not met for the regulation. But let's get into that a bit later about the exchange ecosystem. Let's go back to when you started the exchange, you started getting traction, and you got a bank account in Germany. How long did that last? Is it still lasting today, or did you get any trouble with that?
We still have the bank account today, so it's been super solid. Yeah.
Very nice. And in that sense, I think you are lucky because so many people are struggling with just getting a fiat bank account. And nowadays you also support the US dollars as well. So
Right.
How did that go? How did you manage to convince somebody to give you a bank account in the US?
Actually, we've been through a few bank accounts in the US. None as reliable as Fedor. In some cases, they were willing to bank us, in the early days when the business was fairly small, but when there was some significant growth, they just got worried about the compliance issues, which were not really anything actually existing, just the concern about the optics, like the perception that their regulator would have of dealing with a significant amount of crypto business. In other cases, it was that our volume of transactions that was coming through the bank kind of outgrew the bank's capacity. So, like in one instance, the bank's wire transfer department was extremely manual. Like it was all human. There was some guy who was typing in the wire transfer, information into the system, and then someone else, would like also write a copy of it, manually, and it was a total nightmare. Let's say like each wire transfer took like 20 human minutes to process. Well, there
Right.
was like a time where we started to have like a lot of wire transfers to the point where it was like these guys were getting heinously like bogged down. They had like a huge backlog, and they basically said like, look, we have to hire 10 more people to do your wires. And, we don't know if this is just a fad. Is this like a short-term trend? And after we hire 10 people, you're back to doing only 10 wires a day. And then we have to fire 8 people. So for them, they were a small bank, and it just wasn't worth it. I mean, basically we were like too much business for them. So, I guess this is like another issue with, just the kind of the employment law issue, right? Like they weren't able to really just like hire temporary people to do this.
Right.
But anyway, so like we lost that account. We've lost other accounts, even just that are payroll accounts. It's not taking customer funds at all. It's just like purely money from investors sitting in the bank that is using to pay employees. We've had those accounts shut down. In one case, it was shut down with 5 days notice, which they sent by mail, which arrived like the day after they closed the account. We only found out because people's paychecks were bouncing.
Wow.
So it was like a total, the banks have been a very, very difficult, but eventually we found, so we're working with Synapse Pay here in the US. We're also working with Silvergate. We've got a few options in the United States now, and it's definitely softening up from where it was years ago.
But so when a bank shuts down your account, you're still able to withdraw it to some other account, or do you need the whole procedure to even get access to the funds? What is it like to lose an account and not be a customer anymore?
Well, yeah, it's in if they're nice, they will give you some warning and tell you, like, please move your money in the next 30 days or something. If they're not nice, they just send you the check in the mail, and you find out after your account is already closed. And
All right.
in one case, we actually got a check for a few $100,000, and we could not find another bank to cash it for us for like a year. And basically, we went back to the bank and said, like, they were mad at us because they had to keep reissuing this check. It's like it was like expiring every 6 months or something, and they had to keep reissuing. And they were upset with us, like, why don't you just like deposit this check?
Right.
And we're like, well, why don't you just open the account back up, or you could it's called a cashier's check. And we're like, well, you could just give us the cash. You could just give us whatever, the $100,000 in cash or something. And they were like, no, well, we can't do that. That's
But that's interesting. I've never actually used checks. We don't have it in Europe. You still need to do explaining where you have the money from, and then the other bank may reject you. So when you told them that we just lost our account in this other bank and we would like to move it to your bank, they said we don't want you because it's too risky.
Yeah, basically.
All right, and then you tried to get cash. That didn't work either. So it worked out with your banking at the end of the day, both in the EU and in the US. So we discussed how it worked when it comes to the financial part, but how did it work when it comes to growing the business? You open up the doors, everyone can use Kraken. Did people come to you? Did you have to invest in marketing? How did you grow the startup?
Yeah, we've done almost no marketing. It's almost all been word of mouth. So we've been really lucky in that way. We're pretty engaged with the community. I think we provide a good service. We like to make evangelists out of our customers. We try to offer really excellent customer service, which we hope that will help people spread the word about Kraken. But yeah, the growth has been, like I mentioned, the incident in 2014 with Mt. Gox, where they collapsed. We basically like had a huge windfall of new users coming after that. There've been some other instances. Almost anytime there's like another major exchange hack, we see like a lot of users coming in. Also, like whenever there's like a big pop in the price or like, bull run in the market, you see a lot of people coming in. There's like a lot of media attention. The bull run, new users are always really difficult to deal with because often they just have no idea what they're doing. They don't even know what Bitcoin is. They just know that it doubled in price, every day last week.
I mean, in many ways, that's what sometimes when I think back on the bull run we had, what exchanges that didn't have fiat, for example, Binance, they basically outsourced all the education to you because you had to get those first people who didn't even know what Bitcoin is and educate them, and they had all the questions and they don't even know what a wallet is. Once they learn that, they just go to Binance and they don't have to do anything because it's crypto to crypto. So I think it's interesting that you mentioned that. And it's also, I think what you say is very powerful because I learned that up until just a few weeks ago, you didn't even have a referral program. And that is how most exchanges grow recently. You just have very generous referrals and affiliate, and people can make money by referring customers. You did not have anything like that until a few weeks ago when one of your marketing guys reached out and said, finally, Ivan, we have a referral program. And despite of that, you're still one of the biggest exchanges. So really well done on that front. Because then it basically means that you grew organically. Also, I think it's important to note that you really managed it well as a business person. I know some people here in Sweden who also started exchanges way back, but they did some mistakes, for example, never taking in external capital. So they couldn't grow at the rate as you could and really capture global markets. So can you talk a bit about that? How did you think about growing this business? Did you have a lot of business knowledge since the past with your virtual goods store? How did you execute this so well?
Yeah, thanks. There's a lot of luck involved, of course, good timing. I had some business experience from the past. I had the virtual goods business for 10 years. That was 50 people, totally remote business. We had a bunch of business deals with guys in China and other parts of the world. So I was like fairly experienced with business from that. Before that, I had another company selling Magic the Gathering and Pokemon cards online, another e-commerce business. Before that, I had a business selling basically like used computer equipment, which was like right after the .com bubble burst in 2001 or 2000. Where, basically I was like living in the Silicon Valley. All these companies collapsed when the bubble burst, and there were all these auctions for computer equipment. And so this is also like the early days of eBay and PayPal. So I would go to these auctions, buy a bunch of like, a pallet of laptops, and like half of them would be broken in some way. But I was always like building computers since I was a kid and stuff. So I would just like take apart the laptops and like sort of make like Frankenstein's, like laptops out of them, like swapping parts, like basically, taking parts from the bad ones and making fully good ones. So I did that for a while and selling the computer equipment on eBay. So I've had, I've basically been an entrepreneur for the last, 20 years or so. But lots of new lessons learned in this business. And, this business is much larger than the last one. We're over 800 people now. So we raised capital early on. I thought that we would need to raise venture money for this business, just given all of the regulatory implications and just so much complexity to this industry, and it's going to be a global business. I think we actually wasted a lot of money early on legal stuff, where basically we're paying to educate lawyers for $400 an hour. Even after 100 hours of thinking about crypto, teaching them about crypto, they still did not really have a very strong opinion. I think the lawyers love to stay in the gray area, and never tell you like yes or
exactly.
No for sure. I think at least we could show that we made a reasonable effort to try to understand and do the right thing. But at the end of the day, the lawyers were not super helpful. I mean, they couldn't really tell us anything we didn't already know. They couldn't really give us assurances anywhere. So we burnt millions of dollars on that we had raised, And you've seen some other guys do it from scratch, like without having to raise capital. I think Poloniex did it. I think Binance, well, they raised a ton of money through the token, but they got started. And I think if you start with pure crypto, which is an option now, that was not an option back in 2011. You basically had like Bitcoin, Namecoin, maybe that was it.
Right.
There weren't like millions of shit coins that like you could trade to really like make an exchange out of. So we kind of had to take the path of figuring out how to do fiat currencies, because that's what people traded. They basically, it was just Bitcoin and fiat. And things really changed a lot when Ethereum launched. That basically like doubled the size of our business. That was really like the first token. We've been trading XRP, and we've been trading Namecoin before that, but Ethereum really just kicked off just a huge amount of interest in the space, and obviously all the ERC20 tokens that came after that. So I think like Ethereum is really the catalyst that kind of like brought us into like the current era of having like tons of coins and exchanges.
And also, I think it started the previous bull market for sure, because it was a new narrative with Web 3.0. You could build own dApps, own projects. So that was the perfect narrative to start the bull run. Also, I'm curious a bit, when did you start raising money? Was it when you had the prototype, or you already had the business? For people who are watching and they're curious in learning, how can I go about this? If some people want to start a crypto business or just any business, when is the right time to really raise capital? If you think that you need capital, but you're not sure, should I build a prototype? Maybe the valuation will be a bit better if I come a bit further down the road. What is your view on that? When is the good time?
Yeah, well, for us, even back in 2013, it was very hard to raise money. Most investors, and I would say still today, most investors in Silicon Valley don't understand crypto. They don't have a view of like what the future is going to be in crypto. They just don't understand the space and how things fit together. So it's still really hard to raise money in crypto. There are a few funds which are specializing in crypto, like Blockchain Capital, Digital Currency Group, Libertas. There are a bunch of Bitcoin angels who'd be great to raise from. So it's still tough. But I would say the further along you can get, the better. When we went to raise, we had a fully functioning product. Like we were already in the market and operating, and the raise is really focused on figuring out the regulatory situation around the world, licenses, and just hiring additional devs to scale out, basically to grow the product for what we thought was like the future of the way that things would go. So I've also done a bunch of angel investments myself. Things that generally I look for are, it's great if you can find a founder that has some prior business experience. That's always helpful. But then just having a working product, even at like a prototype level, is huge. Because the ideas are so cheap and easy to come by. It's really like, can you execute on this? That I think is the real question. And also, like, do you seem like the kind of person who can pivot if things don't go 100%, according to plan? And I think like most investors are looking at that, really. Like, it's almost guaranteed things aren't going to go according to plan. So does this team seem like they could pivot if they really needed to, or are they kind of like just so focused on this one thing that if that doesn't work, the company is a failure?
It's interesting you mentioned the fact that you need to have business experience and you use the money to hire people. And by the way, when it comes to angel investing, I recently read the book by Jason Calacanis, Angel. He is really somebody who inspires me a lot, and that is also why I'm interested in learning how you think when you started Kraken and did raise money. And so you mentioned that you used the money you raised after you built the prototype, you raised money and then use it to hire people. And I know that you are a remote organization. You have 800 employees. Basically, all of them are remote. Right. How do you manage that? How do you make sure that they're working, they're not relaxing? How do you make sure that everyone is on the same page? How do you structure the hierarchy? Do you have any hierarchy? Please talk about that subject.
Yeah, we have some hierarchy for sure. There was one guy in the company who thought, he's not with us anymore, but he thought, he's very like serious crypto guy, thought, well, crypto is completely decentralized and therefore the company should be completely
Right.
decentralized. There should be no authorities in the company. Nobody should be able to make decisions in the company. It should all be like everyone does whatever they want. That didn't work out very well, but he's gone to start his own company, and I hope things are going well for him. But yeah, so we're mostly remote. We have a few offices which are kind of small, maybe like 20 people. But like 700 of the 800 people are remote. And we fortunately, even over the last 10 years, the tools for collaborating online have improved dramatically. Now we have Zoom. We have all the G Suite tools have come a long way. We have Slack now, which didn't exist even maybe 5 years ago. There's all sorts of great collaboration tools. So we're on all these like all the time. And the management structure we have in place, we're heavily tracking metrics on things. So some roles are easier to evaluate than others. For like the customer service agents doing support tickets, it's kind of easy to see in the system, how many tickets they solved, what is their satisfaction rating, when did they log in and when did they log out, kind of stuff. We're generating reports for this stuff all the time. For other people who are, let's say like the software developers, I mean, you see when they check in code, someone's always reviewing the code. Basically, I mean, we rely a lot on the managers effectively to say like whether their team is doing well or not. And there's not always someone like looking over your shoulder, making sure you're looking busy, and I think when you go into like an office, people are just like screwing around. Like they're not actually being productive. They just like appear to be typing on their computer, but it's really like worthless stuff. So we find especially for some roles, the software engineers in particular will have kind of like bursts of productivity where, maybe they start working at 8 p.m. and they just like get in the zone and they're working for the next 12 hours straight, solving a really complicated problem. You wouldn't really be able to do that like in an office environment, where you kind of have to come in from 9 to 5. The more creative stuff, I think it's helpful to have a more flexible schedule. And we're not tracking the hours that the software developers are working. It's just sort of like, does it seem like you're getting enough work done? As a full-time employee, that's kind of like the test. Are you contributing like a good amount of value? It gives people a lot of flexibility to do whatever they want, to really manage their own time. Of course, we have like scheduled meetings and certain things happen where they have to be present at a certain time, but for like the guys with kids or people with disabilities or people that live in an area where traffic is really terrible, who maybe they were spending 2 hours a day commuting before, the remote thing is huge for them. That's a huge value. It's a huge benefit of working at the company for them. There are some people who like to go into the office, and so we have a few offices around the world. If people really want to work in an office, they can relocate to one of those areas where we have an office. Some guys just say like, look, I've got, there's 2 young kids at home, and if I'm at home, there's just absolutely no way I'm getting any work done. So, they come into the office as sort of an escape to have like a quiet place to work. It works out differently for different people. We've had people quit who have said they thought it was going to be really fun working from home. They thought they were just going to be in their pajamas all day drinking wine, and and then it turns out they realized like 3 months later they're very extroverted, like social people, and they just felt like they were becoming a hermit and got very depressed, like not seeing people every day, and said, I'm never going to work remotely ever again. I have to be around people.
So it really depends on the personality. At the same time, how do you build the culture? Because even if you're motivated, even if you are amazing performing coder and you hire such a person, and how do you still keep them going? How do you have one-on-one talks? How do you keep them developing? How do you keep them growing? And how do you get to know them? Maybe that's what's most important, because for you to be able to motivate them, you need to know how they're driven, what they want in life, how you can help them. So how do you ensure that culture, although you don't even see most of your employees and you've never met them?
Yeah, so managers usually have one-on-one with their direct reports every week, where they're catching up on a Zoom call or whatever. Excuse me. We also do company retreats. So like at least twice a year, we try to get the teams together. It's very hard now that we're like 800 people. The last time we did a full company-wide retreat, we were like 150 people, and this was like the end of 2017. And we had everyone in Bali, which was like super awesome. And
Nice.
yeah, it was great to like get everyone together, and that kind of thing is, you have all kinds of fun activities people do, and it was a great bonding experience. Is awesome for people to just get to interact with people in person, because you don't know really, sometimes you see people typing something, and if you don't know the person's personality or how they speak, they might not even be like a native English speaker, and they might say something in a way you might misinterpret it. It's great if you can use like a lot of emojis when you're typing, because you really like, you can get the your meaning across. But establishing that rapport in person, I think, is hugely valuable. And we try to get all the new guys who come on to at least visit an office for a few days in the beginning, or definitely like attend a retreat, so that they kind of get a feel for like the vibe of their coworkers and other people in the company, people who they're going to be working with, so that when they go back to the computer, people are typing things, like they give them the benefit of the doubt. Like when someone said something, which maybe if you're just reading it on the screen could be rude, but if you know the person, you met them, you had a great time chatting with them, you guys got beers together, whatever, it's, the guy's not just like trying to be an asshole, right? Like
Yes.
he's probably just, just didn't come through in the text chat that, his real meaning. So I think that's really important. I would say anyone running a remote company, like just try to get people together as much as possible to have the bonding and the FaceTime and rapport building, so that they can be more productive back at the computer.
When you tell me about the remote organization that you have, I think a bit about Automatic. I'm not sure if they're 100% remote, but I listened to a podcast with the CEO, and he was talking about the fact that he usually wants to interview people through Slack. Because as you also told, you don't know how the person looks like. You don't know if he has a weird accent. You can only see what he types or she types, and you have a better chance to really getting into their mind that way, because you're only evaluating what they're saying, what they're trying to communicate. You're not getting distracted by weird accents or how they look or smell or whatever. So that is a connection that I make. When you look at the companies in the crypto space right now that have been in the past when you started as well, which ones are they? So Poloniex is quite old as well, but they're not really where they were previously. Why do you think that is? Can you comment on that? Why? Because I remember I was sitting in the troll box at Poloniex and just chatting and trading. It was really good times. Why do you think they failed while you're still one of the top exchanges?
Yeah, I think, so they came a bit after us, but I think there's been this sort of passing of the torch among the exchanges that lists like every coin. And I mean, you saw it with basically Cryptsy was like the first one, and Cryptsy blew up. They basically got hacked by some shit coin that they listed, which contained a Trojan, which basically like allowed them to hack the whole exchange.
Wow.
And then after that, like Poloniex was like the next exchange that sort of inherited all of that activity. So they became really big, really fast. I think one of the things these guys have in common too is that they weren't doing any kind of KYC. Like basically anyone could come on with like zero friction, like no information, just like sign up and start trading. After that, it was sort of after, I think at some point Poloniex started to get some heat from the government agencies, about like, you're doing so much business, you're not collecting KYC documents, there's potentially some, probably some investigation, probably some criminal investigations led them to Poloniex, and they discovered that they weren't really collecting the information that they should have been. So I think Poloniex slowed down a lot. They started to collect information. They weren't listing so many coins, and then it seemed like Bittrex sort of like, inherited the volume from there, and then it was like the same thing all over again. Like Bittrex slowed down on their listings, started collecting more KYC, and then it was like Binance after that. Like the new guy, no KYC, every coin. And
but
so
they didn't have fiat, I guess. That is why they felt more comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have to satisfy the banks if you're not doing fiat, but the law enforcement agencies and the regulators, you still do. So eventually that'll catch up with you. So it's not, the bank is obviously like not a blocker to your getting business done. If you can just trade crypto to crypto, but at some point the regulator will catch up to you. And I think we've seen this, they've caught up to Binance as well, which is why they now have split the company into this US entity, in order to like segregate that from the global business. But I think so Poloniex, I think the value prop, the core value prop was basically being a casino with no KYC. And once you remove that, people don't have a reason to trade there anymore, right? They're going to go somewhere else. The people that actually just want to buy and sell Bitcoin, for dollars are trading where they have some fiat rails, like they're trading at Kraken or Bitstamp or Coinbase or whatever. Those aren't usually like the same people that are trading, they just want to trade all the shit coins, crypto to crypto with no KYC. So, I think that Poloniex maybe were kind of forced into this position by the regulators and law enforcement, but basically by starting to require KYC and reducing the number of new listings, they pretty much eliminated their competitive advantage that they had versus the fiat gateway exchanges, basically. And they also eliminated the advantage that they had over the other exchanges that were not doing any KYC, just call them like the casino exchanges, So I think they kind of like lost their niche. There wasn't really, they weren't competing with the fiat rail exchanges, and they also weren't competing with the casino exchanges anymore. So I think that they just kind of like lost their clients. And they've also kind of traded hands like at least twice now. They sold to Circle, and I think Circle had to do a tremendous amount of work to try to like dig them out of the hole that they were in, but ultimately, it seems like they were not able to regain the traction that they had in the past, and then they've just sold again to someone else recently. So I don't know what the future holds there, but I think we'll continue to kind of see this pattern happen where an exchange comes out, they're basically running the casino model with no KYC, all the shit coins. They'll get big very quickly, and then they'll start to get some heat from the regulators. They'll change their strategy. They'll start collecting KYC. They'll start not listing, all the new shit coins, and then people that value that stuff will go to the next new exchange that is doing all that stuff that hasn't gotten big enough yet that they've attracted the attention of the regulator. So it's like whack-a-mole. I think people just keep hopping around to the latest casino that serves their needs.
It's interesting also with Bitfinex. They've been through so much, and they have been accused of so much with Tether, and now they have the investigation with New York General Attorney as well. What do you think about that situation? Do you think that the allegations are true about them printing Tether out of thin air or manipulating the market? We had these 2 studies come out, or is the same study that got updated from Texas, some university there, claiming that they basically created the whole bull run of 2017. What is your view on their role in our markets?
Yeah, I think that claim about Tether creating the bull run, or like one lone super whale.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's like largely been debunked. I mean, the guys that are writing these academics writing these reports make so many mistakes. Like, they just don't understand how markets work. They don't understand how flows move between exchanges. They don't even understand what an order book is, or why a coin like Tether could have any volatility in it. So, you know, it's unfortunate that these like terrible studies keep getting published by mainstream media. But I think Tether, you know, I have to give credit to Bitfinex and Tether, because these guys have 9 lives. You know, they keep they keep somehow pulling themselves out of the grave. You know, it seems like it just seems like every time, you know, they take, it's like a headshot, and they just like get back up. So I don't know how they do it. You know, there should be like a Bitfinex class in business school that is taught to everyone. The guys are amazing, but I think this Tether stuff, it's, you know, it seems like, you know, they got screwed by this, by the banking situation that exists. And it seems like they effectively like could not find a real legit banking partner, and ended up going with these guys, Crypto Capital, who either were stealing money or had money confiscated by governments. It seems like there might be like $850 million that was in Crypto Capital that was confiscated by governments, because it was, you know, I don't know what other business Crypto Capital had, but I think the allegation is that they were somehow involved in money laundering.
And the CEO was recently arrested last week.
Yeah. So, you know, that's obviously terrible. You know, I think if Bitfinex had another option with a legitimate, you know, major bank, they would not have used a service like that. It's only just kind of like as a last resort, which is, you know, a shame. That's the state of things. I mean, basically the regulation is creating more consumer risk. You know, it's just like if you are, you know, banning abortion, you know, you're forcing people are still going to do it. It's just going to be like in an alley somewhere, you know, in an unsanitary way where there's going to be much more risk, and, you know, more people are going to get hurt. So, the Tether situation, you know, I guess it's hard to know what to believe. I would never like vouch for Tether, but it seems like, at least on the surface, that the net value of all the assets is potentially there. Maybe they're not holding on to it anymore. Maybe the government has it. I think it's really interesting that the market hadn't really responded to this news.
Nobody cares.
Right. It's just like
one Tether is $1. That's it.
Exactly. I mean, people say, well, but Tether's not backed by anything. And they say, well, the dollar's not backed by anything either. So what does it matter? Like,
and it's fascinating that it's so popular in Asia. China is all Tether. It's not Bitcoin. They want to pay in Tether. They want to get paid in Tether. And so it shows that they care mostly about international borderless transactions more than digital gold. That's what matters. Yeah. And also that allowed all of these crypto-to-crypto exchanges to really exist, because people, of course, sometimes just want to get out of the market and they go to Tether so that they can relax and then they can get into crypto again.
Yeah, there's actually some countries, I think it was France, recently came out and said that crypto to crypto trades are not taxed. So actually, if you're going between like Bitcoin and Tether, this is not taxed. Whereas if you went from Bitcoin to dollar, that would be taxed. So even though Tether is like supposed to be dollars, this is like a, you know, kind of a loophole. So people want to use Tether because they dodge these like tax reporting requirements.
That's very interesting, and that's true as well. And it feels like regulators now go after stablecoins. You look at the IMF; they released this report where they say Bitcoin has failed. That's what they claim. It failed all its missions, but stablecoins, that's a whole other beast. It seems to be succeeding. So we should come after stablecoins.
Yeah. This whole, all the attention on Libra right now is really interesting. And it's funny to see Congress make all these criticisms of Libra. Like, one, we don't want one currency to be ruling the world. We don't want to have a monopoly on currency. You know,
Right.
all these criticisms are like, wait a minute, you realize there already is a monopoly on currency. You have it, and this is actually just like another option. This is an alternative. It's choice. And you know, it's like the people in government just don't understand how the system actually works. You know, and their criticisms of stable coins are just, you know, the criticisms of themselves, really. And it's, I think, just shows that having more choice of currencies is a good thing. And hopefully we'll see more of that in the future. I mean, I'm sure we'll see government issued fiat tokens at some point. But I think it'd be great to see other sorts of like Libra-like baskets of currencies, and stuff like DAI is really cool. And you know, I hope that it becomes kind of like a consumer rights issue to have a choice of currency in the future, be it like government issued or private company issued, or community currencies, or even like, you know, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. I think that this is going to be, you know, an issue in the future. But you know, I agree with you that a lot of people, they don't care to be speculating on Bitcoin. You know, maybe they only have $100 in their bank account. They can't really afford to take the volatility risk there. But you know, if they can get into like Tether or USDC, or, you know, Pax dollars or whatever, you know, there's a bunch of these, and if it allows them to basically maintain like a flat store of value, but also they can use it in the way that crypto is used. So they can use it to interact with DeFi, with smart contracts, with, maybe they can make payments with it. You know, maybe the merchant actually accepts like Tether, but not Bitcoin. You know, there's reasons to hold it. And I think, you know, people that, let's say they can't get a bank account that's going to pay them an interest rate. Well, if you have, you know, $100 worth of the ERC20 Tether token or DAI, you can put that in a smart contract and start earning interest on it. And
yes.
you know, that's something that like you can't really do today, as a small consumer. So I think that's huge. I think more people are going to do that, and I do see there's like a very strong use case for tokenized fiat currencies.
And also, it blows my mind, the arbitrage between the fiat interest rates and DeFi interest rates.
Yeah.
I mean, you could get up to 10% in some cases. And this arbitrage is, of course, due to the fact that the tech is really not really proven yet. Who knows if MakerDAO or Compound, all these protocols will work long term, and if the market crashes, will they still work, things like that. But it feels like all exchanges in the near future will have to support it, that it will become a standard that you can, you know, you have Bitcoin on Kraken or somewhere else, and then you can just start earning interest on it, not through you taking money and lending it out, but through actual protocols.
Right. Yeah. So we're about to launch staking very soon for Tezos. And I see this as like sort of another extension of that kind of product, where you're right. There's not technically like a Bitcoin staking, excuse me, but you know, we could basically expose just kind of a user interface for DeFi contracts for people to effectively, you know, like stake their Bitcoin through you know, putting it into a contract that's going to pay a return, you know, and get the return off that. Yeah, I think that's the future. You know, like you said, there's still some risks there, right? Like, just because it's on the blockchain and just because it's open source doesn't mean that there aren't any potential security problems, right? Like, people keep finding bugs in smart contracts. We've seen stuff like the DAO blow up.
Right.
So, you know, there's always some risk there. But I think over time, that risk will be reduced. The bugs will be discovered, and I think security will be improved.
Why are you starting with Tezos? Because I think today Coinbase announced that they're also gonna do Tezos, that they also released Tezos staking.
Right. Yeah. It's just been on the roadmap for a while. We've got other stuff in the works too. Atoms, Cosmos Atoms, and some other assets as well coming soon.
Today it feels that we discussed the different trends, and we discussed this wave that you have a new exchange coming up without KYC, they have all the tokens, people go there, they gamble, and then they go to other exchanges when that exchange gets pushback from regulators. But now it feels that there is a slightly different model, and that is leverage. Nobody really wants to trade altcoins nowadays to the extent they wanted yesterday or just 1 year ago. Everyone wants to do leverage. What is your view on that? Do you see that as well in your statistics and in your performance, that people just want to do leverage nowadays? And do you think it will end when we see another bull run and all altcoins starting going up again? Because it feels like everyone is just doing leverage now, not that much excitement about altcoins.
Yeah, I think the altcoin hype has largely died off. I mean, we've seen the vast majority of those coins, probably 99% of those coins, lose like 95% of their value from the all-time high. So I think that people have kind of realized that most of these altcoins are really seed stage startups, and most startups fail, and a lot of the incentives are screwed up with some of those ICOs. Where like the founders got paid millions of dollars before they even delivered a working product, and maybe now they're not really incentivized to continue building. So I think people got burned by that. Of course, there's tons of terrible stocks in the public stock markets as well. But I think that the hype is worn off, and people have refocused kind of on kind of the top few really high potential, high quality projects. Leverage. Yeah, we see a lot of use of leverage. We have a futures product as well that offers up to 50x leverage on the futures contracts. Our spot leverage product offers up to 5x on some pairs. I think you always see, because there's always broad disagreement about what the price should be. There's always someone who wants to short Bitcoin. Personally, I never recommend shorting Bitcoin. But if
historically a bad choice, historically a very bad choice, yes.
Yeah, we definitely have way more demand to go long Bitcoin, but we've only got so many dollars in the system. It's the margin pool for borrowing dollars to buy Bitcoin is constantly being exhausted, which I think is good. People are bullish.
Yeah, that's true. Also, I guess when the ICO hype came around, you were offered a lot of money for listing projects, and some exchanges really made it their business models. Yeah. Yet we did not see any launchpad IEO model on Kraken, and we don't really see any ICOs being listed left and right. So how did you think when you got those offers? Did you consider taking them? Because at the end of the day, it could help you to survive long term and to grow your team and to grow your business even better. And really, if people want to trade them, why not? So that could be one way of thinking about it. Another way could be that, hey, we're not going to do it because it's not long term and we don't want to deal with that at all. So what went through your head?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of that. We've been profitable since 2015, and we're also long Bitcoin. So when all the hype is coming up, the Bitcoin price is also going up, and we're also feeling even more rich, and not like we really need to make any compromises. And we looked at a lot of these projects, and they were just terrible. They had nothing, right? Like, there weren't projects that we could say like we would actually invest in ourselves, and they seemed just like pump and dumps. And we really have, like I said in the beginning, we see ourselves as being this bridge, this legitimate player that can make the regulators comfortable and make the consumers comfortable to get across to the other side of crypto utopia in the end. And we saw, like, doing this, listing all of these coins is just counterproductive to that that long-term goal. We felt like it would be damaging to our reputation. We also don't see our clients as the product to be sold to, the highest bidding ICO scam. So, yeah, we absolutely could have made a ton of money listing a ton of terrible projects, but, I would have personally felt terrible exposing our clients to that. I feel like we're selling out our clients. We don't sell our clients data. We don't sell them out to scams. And I think that being able to take kind of a more neutral view of something, not being incentivized to list something apart just from our own, revenue and our own client demand and stuff like that. Not taking a listing fee, I think, in the long run is going to be appreciated. I think people will see being listed on Kraken as something that's meaningful, and I think our clients will trust us more as a result. They'll know that we are not selling you out. We are posting projects which we think are worth your consideration. We don't necessarily think it's a great investment at this price, but we think, it's not obviously a scam. They seem to be, a real team with a real roadmap. They've got some real traction or whatever.
Right.
Something worthy of listing. So yeah, we think, we're playing a very long game. The mission is to bring more people into crypto. It's not just to make a bunch of money real quickly while we burn a bunch of customers, and then disappear before the regulator shows up. We still want to be here in 20 years. And we want to be a big part of bringing people across the bridge into crypto.
Long-term thinking is very important in this space, especially when so many people think only short-term. Also, finally, it's important to talk about the data. As you mentioned, you don't sell the data, but I think many people wonder, if I use Kraken and suddenly a regulator or a government wants to know my data, can they get that? Or is it only the big countries such as the US, maybe Canada, maybe UK that can get those? Or can any countries, some country, I don't know, in Latin America or Europe or Africa, can they also subpoena and get data? To whom do you respond and what is the process?
Yeah, so we have a few different operating entities around the world. So if the US asks for data, the US operating entity basically just has data on US clients. So the US could ask for information about US clients. The entity in the UK could ask for information about clients within the EU. So for example, if say Thailand, the Thailand law enforcement agency sent a subpoena to us asking for some information about a UK resident, we would say no, you have to, if you want that information, you have to work with the UK law enforcement, and we have to receive the request from the UK law enforcement. And, if they want to share it with you, that's up to them, but that's kind of the process. So, and, sometimes they're upset about that, but that's the way that, these law enforcement agencies work together. I mean, basically they have to have a relationship kind of with the local oversight authority to be able to get that information out. So we always make sure that when we get a request that it's legitimate, we verify it. We make sure it's not a request coming from a scammer or someone pretending to be in the government or something like that.
Right.
And then we make sure that it's actually like legal and enforceable there. We're not just like handing over customer information when anytime somebody asks. It's got to be like a real qualified legal demand that we actually have to comply with. And in some cases we push back and say, like, that's too much information. You don't actually need all that. Like, what is the specific information you need, where we think that, maybe they're taking a shotgun approach. They're actually only interested in one guy, but, they're asking for like all of the information. Sometimes they ask for a lot of information because they don't want to let you know that they're investigating a particular person. So they don't want to say like, give me Jesse Powell's account information. They'll say like, give me all of the account information for everyone living in California. And they only care about, seeing my account records, but like they don't want to tip us off.
But it's still good for them to have everyone else in case they need it. So it's they can save it as well.
Yeah,
I think you wrote on Twitter that you get hundreds of these requests per year or per month, but I think it was you that wrote that, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot. So how much is that, and how much are you spending on compliance?
Yeah, it's hundreds a year. I think we might have something like 600 by the end of this year. It's a lot that we spend on compliance. You know, we get at least, you know, 2 requests a day to produce some sort of information related to some investigation. Often, you know, as well, outside of law enforcement requests, we get requests from regulators who just want more help understanding what's happening. So it's a huge burden. We've got a huge compliance team. You know, there's a lot. It's just extremely costly. You know, it probably costs us a few $1 million a year to deal with this, and it's unfortunately a cost of doing business. And it's just going to probably get bigger over time.
That's true, because you get bigger, more people get involved, and we're nowhere near mass adoption yet. Looking into the future and where you're heading, where the industry is heading, what is your outlook? Where do you think we'll be in 1 to 5 years? Do you think we're gonna see another bull market soon? Obviously, it's speculation; nobody can know. But what is your gut feeling on the market?
Yeah, I think we'll probably see another bull market 3 to 6 months after the next Bitcoin halving. That's like historically kind of what we've seen. There's kind of like lag effect.
You're a believer in stock to flow?
You know, I think there's obviously a strong correlation there, but all kinds of things can happen, right? Like it doesn't mean it's causation. The crypto space, you know, there could be worldwide ban on Bitcoin tomorrow, and that would, you know, have a dramatic effect on the price out of the band of stock to flow. And, you know, there could also just be some other crazy hype. You know, Trump could come out and say like the US is switching to Bitcoin, like, you know, dumping all our dollars. It's like there's just so many things that go into the price. It's, you know, we always try to back it out, and people are doing all this technical analysis on the charts and stuff, trying to figure out, you know, like, oh, it was you know, it was because Jennifer Lopez, you know, said something about, you know, Bitcoin, whatever. You know, it's like you can come up with all of these reasons in hindsight, but you know, day to day, it's just it's hard to know. You know, there's so many inputs to the price, and there's not any sort of you know, it's more of like a kind of a network measure, you know, like a network effect kind of thing. It'd be kind of like trying to value, I guess more of like valuing a Facebook or something like that than it is valuing a stock, because it's like the more people that are using it, the more valuable it is. And there's not any sort of like base business metrics you can look at, you know, like what is the profitability, you know, what is the growth rate, like stuff like that. I mean, there are things you can look at, like the number of transactions, number of wallets, things like that. But it's all just, I mean, ultimately, if Bitcoin is going to replace all the world's money, the value is like infinity, right? It's like, it's really the dollar going to zero. It's like all fiat currency is going to zero. And then therefore, you know, Bitcoin is worth all the money.
One Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. All other metrics become irrelevant with time, especially when we see the fiat collapse. Before I let you go, Jesse, I know you're a very busy man, and obviously we're very thankful for your time. We've spent already so much time together. Awesome. I listened to your podcast, How to Build the Decacorn. Cool. You made a few episodes. That was very interesting. Yeah. So you're valuing your company at 10 billion, because that is what Decacorn means, right?
We hope we're on our way to 10 billion. We're growing into a Decacorn. The last round we did was at 4 billion.
4 billion. Wow. Yeah, it's really astonishing that we do have unicorns in the space. And so Binance, they usually share their profits because they burn tokens based on their profits. Right. So they've had quarters where they make $250 million. Sometimes it's more than Deutsche Bank makes.
Yeah.
So are you guys open with how much you make as well, or is that a secret, approximately per year, so people have some kind of idea what we're talking about?
Yeah, no, we're not open with that. We haven't had any quarters that strong. Binance is totally crushing it. We've intentionally taken a much more careful approach.
Got it.
I think means forfeiting some short-term revenue, but maybe someday we'll go public and that information will be out there.
Got it. I think, by the way, we will see many public listings in crypto. It's because already right now in Sweden we've seen a couple. It may be the next hype, by the way, that we see a lot of public listings that are maybe not that legit, but people are still excited because it's a bull run. That being said,
3 to 5 years, I think you'll see some IPOs in the US.
Right. I think so too. Jesse, thank you so much for being here and sharing your knowledge, your experience. It was truly a blast. And guys, I hope you learned a lot. Definitely go to Kraken right now. Sign up if you haven't. You guys have new features with futures, right? Because I think it's quite new. What is the newest thing that you've done?
Yeah, there's we're listing new tokens basically every 2 weeks lately. Futures is available for everyone basically outside of the United States. We've also got the Crypto Watch platform, which is like a multi-exchange trading tool, portfolio management tool, which also has a troll box. If you want to get your troll box,
get back to troll back
on. Check out Crypto Watch. We've got the index business, which is powering the CME's futures contracts. There's a lot going on. Yeah, follow the blog. Follow us on Twitter at KrakenFX.
And also check out How to Build a Decacorn. You're still doing those episodes? I listened to them when you did the episodes about Quadriga.
Yeah, we would like to do some more soon. I'm really impressed at the pace that you keep up with your shows. It's like so much work. We did it a few times and we're just like, this is so much work. It's like for every hour of footage is like 10 hours of editing. So we kind of put it on pause while we kind of like find a team to help us with this. But yeah, we'd like to do some more episodes.
Awesome. Guys, you can find it in the description. That being said, everyone, I'll see you very, very soon. Smash the like, smash the bell, and goodbye, guys. Goodbye.
Thanks.